Hey, you're listening to a mainstream podcast from the middle school ministry, Rapids. We hope you enjoy.
Morning. Yeah. Give it up for the band today. Week in and week out, they are giving away their time for Jesus and so that we can have some nice sounding worship. Amen. How you guys doing this morning? Yeah? We're going into a new series today. Does anyone know what it is? Bed, Bath, and Beyond. That's what it should have been, honestly. That's far. No, it's not Bed, Bath, and Beyond. Come on. It is Beyond. Boom. Very different. Beyond. Does anyone know what that means? It's like such a crazy word. Like further away. I like that. So the Bible verse that me and Pastor Jake were thinking of when we thought of beyond was Ephesians 3:20. And it speaks on that God, for his glory, will go beyond anything we can ask or even imagine. So today I want to talk about having beyond faith. So having that faith that is just beyond anything you could even describe. And there was a few stories I could think of. I was like, okay, what stories do I want to share about this, like in the Bible? Because, I mean, there's hundreds of stories in the Bible on faith. But there's this one story that really popped out to me. And so we start with talking about this leader of the Jewish temple, right, of the synagogue. His name is Jairus. And so then he's the leader of the Jewish temple, which means, he's one of those, sold out Jewish people, Old Testament type of stuff. But he encounters a major problem. His daughter starts to get very ill, and he doesn't know what to do. But he goes to Jesus, which if you know, the leader of his synagogue would not normally go to Jesus because he doesn't believe in Jesus. But he knew something was special about Jesus. So he finds himself at Jesus' feet, and right here he says, when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently with him. My little daughter is dying, he said. Please come and lay your hands on her, heal her, so she can live. Wow. So imagine that. This Jewish leader, this synagogue leader, denies his entire reputation at the synagogue, denies his entire job, basically, and he falls at Jesus' feet because he's got nothing left. He's got nothing else to do. He doesn't know what to do. So Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. And here's one of those moments where the Bible just does a whole curveball. You're just talking about one thing, and then it just goes boom. And it's like a whole new person. There's not even a paragraph separation. It's just a woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. Does it sound like that sentence fits in with the next? You'll see right here. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them. But she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. I shared this in the first service, but do we know that there's a doctor who was a disciple? Does anyone know who it is? Scream it out if you know it. Yes, Luke. He was actually a doctor, and Luke tells this exact same story. So we're reading out of Mark, but Luke tells the exact same story, but he leaves out the doctor part. And I think he left it out because he knows what a doctor is, and he knows how it works. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. But Mark was being a little ignorant, those doctors don't know what they're doing. They couldn't even help her. In fact, she got even worse than when she was seeing a doctor. So I like to think that Mark was being a little bit funny there, mentioning that she had gone to doctors and had gotten worse. So it says in verse 27, she had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, if I can just touch his robe, I will be healed. Immediately the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. Wow. So if you look at Leviticus, right, the Old Testament law, this condition is actually mentioned. And it's, the bleeding that never stops. It's literally mentioned in Leviticus, and it mentions that anything she touches must be cleaned for a week before it can be touched by someone who is considered clean. So she would have been called a downcast, like she would have been someone that you just don't talk to, don't touch, don't ever, if she touches your shirt, you got to go get a new one and you got to get that one washed for a week. Does that make sense? So her touching Jesus' robe wasn't just like your friend, tapping your shoulder or, pulling on your pants. Like, this is real. This is like real law issue if she actually touches someone's robe. Like, at that point, Jesus would have to go change his robe for a week and have that thing washed, and then, yeah. So that tells you how serious this moment is where she breaks the law of the land to go grab Jesus, to go grab that healing, right? So, honestly, what I think there, let's continue first. So he says to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace, your suffering is over." I liked what he called her there, because what was Jairus' problem, right? The leader of the synagogue, what was his problem? His daughter. What did he just call her? Daughter. So it's almost like Jesus is just like taking care of this daughter. Now he's going to go take care of this daughter. I like the way the Bible put that. But here's what I love. Here's what I got out of that part. Beyond faith can heal your situation. Having that faith that goes beyond has the potential to heal your situation. So let me ask you this. What if your faith is being challenged by the laws of your land, right? Now you're like, I don't have any laws of my land. Like, I'm talking about at school. Is it really cool to worship Jesus? Probably not. Is it cool to pray before every meal at school, like knowing people are going to see you do that? Probably not. But what if in that moment Jesus is like, you know what? You just showed beyond faith there. Let me heal you. Oh, you know what? That wasn't easy. I know that because I know everything. Let me bless you for that. God can do that. He just showed it there. Your faith has made you well. I'm not going to say it'll happen for sure because obviously I'm not God. Like, only God can speak for that. But I think some of your guys' faith has been stopping you from receiving healing. Or some of your faith has stopped you from taking this relationship with God to the next level. And he wants you to know that beyond faith can heal your situation. So this woman and Jairus, when they encountered Jesus, they did the exact same thing. They fell right at his feet. What that tells me is that they knew the power of Jesus. They knew that they were in the glory of God once they saw him. And I think some of you guys need to start trying to fall at his feet when you realize that he's before us. Like in this worship set that we just had, were you really falling before Jesus' feet? I don't mean like you just literally kneel down, but was your spiritual soul, like, was it falling before Jesus? Was it broken before Jesus? And there's this quote that I loved. It talks about faith. It says, "Faith for my deliverance is not faith in God." What that means is like faith just for healing is not faith in God. If you're like, oh, I have faith that I'll get healed, that's not it. I have faith in God, and because of that, I may be healed. But then listen to the end of this. Faith means whether I am visibly delivered or not, I will stick to my belief that God is love. There are some things only learned in a fiery furnace. What is that referencing? That's right. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You guys get that? Like, sometimes you'll only learn that you really have that faith when it comes time to get challenged. So, like, have you been challenged yet? If not, then you, like, get ready, because, it happens. All of us have been through life. Like, we know the challenge comes. So you need to know now if your faith will last in that fiery furnace. So faith doesn't depend on a result. Faith is a result of knowing who God is. And it brings me to this story that I've heard. I've heard it a million times, but man, the second I heard it, I was moved, and I've never forgotten it. There's this animal called the African impala. Who's heard of it? A few of you? Yeah, it looks pretty much like what you're imagining, like a skinny, muscly, deer-like animal. But here's the thing. This thing can jump up to 10 feet high. He's got vert, you know what I'm saying? But better yet, this thing can jump 30 feet across. I know you're like not believing me. Look it up, I promise. This thing can jump 30 feet across. That would be pretty much from here probably to the end of that staircase over there. That's like roughly what looks like 30 feet. Now you're like, why aren't there any Impalas in the NBA? I don't know. We haven't trained them yet. Maybe. But here's the craziest part is you can find any of these at the zoo and you think they got like a giant gate that's like as tall as, a tower. No, just a little 3-foot gate like this tall guarding them in. Here's the thing about the Impala is it will never jump somewhere where it can't see where it's landing. So it can't just jump and have faith that the ground is on the other side. It has to see where it's going. So in an open field, man, that thing can go. But in that enclosure, it's scared. It doesn't know. Like, I don't know what's on the other side. What if it just ends over there? You know what I'm saying? So here's the thing. I think some of us have started to act like that with our faith, where we don't know where we're going to land, so we don't ever jump. Our faith is stand still. Our faith is not active. And I believe that God is calling a lot of you, really all of you, to faith with action. I'm sure some of you have it, but if I'm being honest, when I was in middle school, I didn't have active faith. I had the faith that we all have. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's way more to it. As it says in James, faith without deeds is dead. So I'm asking you, is your faith alive? So let's continue on this story. So this woman gets healed. He says, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over. But we're not done yet. What about Jairus? I'd like to think he was watching all this happen. And then he's like, yo, I got to go. Let's go. So let's see what he says. While he was still speaking to her, Jesus speaking to her, messengers arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. They told him, your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now. Wow. So imagine that. Jairus is watching this girl get healed. He's waiting. He's like, Jesus, come on. And Jesus is over here like, I am Jesus. And he's like, come on. And then he's like, who touched my robe? And he's like, come on, my daughter is dying. They find out who touched the robe. I'm sure he got a little bit frustrated, like, how could you not? And then he gets word his daughter died, and there's no use. Don't even ask Jesus anymore. It's over. But Jesus overheard and said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just have faith. Wow. Then Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except Peter, James, and John, the big three. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing. He went inside and asked, why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead. She's only asleep. Now, I don't know. That part, made me laugh a little bit, right? The child isn't dead. She's only asleep. And, Jesus just got there. He's just like, nope, she wake. Just wait. And they're all like, who are you again? You just got here, didn't you? So, of course, the crowd laughed at him, but he made them all leave. He wasn't having it today. He's like, look, I already healed this girl. Get out of here. And he took the girl's father and mother and his 3 disciples into the room where the girl was lying. Holding her hand, he said to her, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, get up. And the girl, who was 12 years old, which she would have been a rapid student, might I add, immediately stood up and walked around, and they were overwhelmed and totally amazed. And that brings me to another point. Beyond faith can do the impossible. I mean, here, like, this was crazy enough. Jesus gets touched on his robe, not even Jesus laying his hands. Like, literally, he didn't even know it was happening. I mean, he's Jesus, so he knew, but like, he acted like he didn't even know. Boop, she's healed. And here, Jesus shows that he's in charge of sickness and he's in charge of death. Like, he showed his power there. And that's why I love that the Bible put those stories one after the other, because it's like, that's enough just to get healed from a sickness. But then to look at a situation that is completely dead and to see Jesus just like, get up. And boom, situation flipped totally around. She's alive now. Like, if that's not Jesus showing his power, I don't know what is. And I think that was important to Jesus' whole story there. Like, I think this sort of reflects that when Jesus kept talking about getting crucified, they shouldn't have been worried, because, like, they saw what he did with this girl. They saw what he did with Lazarus. Like, he has the power over death. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like this was a little bit of a hint at, like, okay, Jesus is that dude, like, for sure. So there's another guy I want to talk about. His name is Roger Bannister. Raise your hand if you're a fan. Okay, just Zach. Zach is the only fan. You don't even know about this guy yet. You're going to love this guy. All right, here's the thing. Roger Bannister was like this student of psychology and like medicine, that kind of thing. But he always wondered why no one could ever run a mile in 4 minutes, right? This was like in the 30s. It was like hundreds of years no one had ever done it in the existence of the world. But he thought, like, I feel like I could do it. I don't know what it is. I just feel like I'm the person that's supposed to do it. So he was looking for the perfect day to do it. He was looking for the sunny day, the big giant crowd, the perfect scenario where he's going to run a mile in under 4 minutes. Well, the day comes, it rains that day, no one really shows up, yet he's still like, today is the day. So sure enough, he's running, he's making great time, everyone's surprised, everyone's cheering. He gets to the end, boom, the end of his mile. He did it in 3 minutes and 59 seconds. My boy did it with a second to spare, but he did it. So that's Roger Bannister. Who's a fan of John Landy? Okay, Zach knows both of them. That's amazing. No, you probably have never heard of him either. Why is that? Because he broke the record just 46 days later. And then 1 year later, three people participating in a mile race broke that record in the same race. So did something magical happen right there where, like, the human body turned into a new, superpower force where they could now run super fast? Y'all need to go back to school. We need to start teaching science at Rapids. No, of course not. Nothing really changed. But what did change? Their mindset. They were like, no, that's impossible. I could never do that. But all it took was Roger Bannister to change that. And then literally, not even 2 months later, someone's like, oh, let me beat that. And he beat it. And then a year later, 3 people basically accidentally beat it. Like, they were just racing. They weren't like, I got to hit that mark. Like, they were just racing each other. So what does that teach us? That teaches us that sometimes we can stop ourselves from doing something just because we think it's impossible. And that's why it's so amazing to serve the God of the impossible. Because it tells us that there's anything possible as long as we're serving God. As long as God's on our side, like, we can conquer anything. So I think that's something that should always be remembered. And it will show if it's not being remembered. Like, you'll know because you'll hit that point. You'll hit that mountain where you're like, yeah, it's time for me to give up. But all you have to do is reference this story. Go back to Mark 5. Read what he did to the young girl that had died. He brought her back to life, just like he can to any of our situations. Amen?
Thank you for listening to a Mainstream Orlando podcast. We hope you join us again soon.